Hello, everyone. I'm Amanda, and this is Nikki, and we're back to talk to you today on a spiritual topic. So before we get into this, I want to say a few caveats. So today, we're going to mostly be hearing from Nikki about her experience and some stories from her life. But we're going to be talking about the topic of religious abuse. Abuse of power in a religious context. And what we want to say for everyone to hear, we're not against Christianity. We're not against your religion of any kind. Organized religion can be a great, cultivating ground for our spirituality and who we are and our connection to the divine. So the churches and synagogues and mosques and all of those places where people gather in a religious context are wonderful places when they're treated in the right way. But I think it's something that's been on my radar a lot lately and has been kind of grinding my gears. It's been really bothering me, is this idea of how across the ages people have used that religious context, that tradition, as a way of controlling people or putting them down or just abusing, neglecting, mistreating, and how those actions can have really lasting negative impact. So I feel like it's important to talk about these things so that people know that they're not alone in their experience, because a lot of times abusers and manipulators want you to feel like you're isolated in what you're going through. So we're gonna talk to you because we feel like you deserve love and you deserve to be seen and heard, and you deserve to find a community where you can thrive as a spirit in whatever context. So I hope you hear that. We love Jesus. We love God. Yeah. We love all those things. Yes. We love when they are being used in ways that they would approve of. So God is love. God is not control, manipulation, subjugation, suppression, any of those things. So that's just the context we're coming from.
Yes, absolutely.
But I'm gonna let Nikki talk now.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and I completely agree with everything you just said. So I'm going to share a little bit about my story. My parents were raised Catholic, and I was baptized Catholic. And then around the time my next sibling was born, I'm the oldest, he was born 3 years later, my parents converted to Christianity, born again Christianity. And the charismatic movement, which was like, speaking in tongues and doing things like that. And then about the age of 5, we sort of moved out to the middle of nowhere, and my parents homeschooled us, and we were raised mostly kind of isolated in our home, although we did go to church every Sunday. My parents tended to move around from church to church. And so most of the religious dynamic for us was happening in the home. And what that looked like for us was we had to read the Bible every morning in a Bible study with my mom. And then we had to do our own reading, and then we had to do a written Bible study, journaling that. And then our homeschool curriculum was Baptist. And then we had to go through that entire process again in the evenings.
How many hours of the Bible is that in a day?
I've read the Bible through many, many times. I know that thing from front to back.
Girl.
But that is okay to me. That really didn't have any negative impact on me. Where the negative dynamic came in was we were taught that God was very punishing. We were taught that we were sinners, and I felt like no matter how many times I asked Jesus for forgiveness, I was going to hell. We were taught that the rapture was going to happen, I didn't even think that I was going to live to be 20 years old. I thought that I was going to be taken before then. And it had always been my dream to be married and have children. I thought I wasn't even going to have the opportunity to do that.
Whoa.
So, you know, our sins were pointed out to us on a daily basis, whether it was pride or ego or, you know, being lazy, whatever it was. So we were living under a constant state of shame and unworthiness and not ever being good enough, you know.
Yikes.
So that was where the dynamic came in, where it was very controlling and fear-based and really unhealthy as a child. And if you have any questions about that, jump in wherever, because the story's a bit long. But
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. But as I got older, I realized I didn't have any hatred towards God. I felt divine movement in my day and in my life, where the destruction to myself and my self-esteem was coming from was from fear. People that were living their lives based off of fear and wanting to control us because of their fears, you know, and that was just kind of rolling downhill from generation to generation.
Were there specific things for you that carried more shame weight? Like, for example, like, I know a lot of times there's a lot of sexual shame in this context. There's a
absolutely.
lot, like, as a woman, like, kind of what were you expected to be? Like, what was...
Right, yeah.
That
so
kind of thing.
I had a certain role that I was supposed to fulfill, obviously. So, yes, sex was very shamed. Like, you know, we were actually taught that it was something dirty. So, you know, me and my siblings experienced a lot of shame around that. And then as women, we weren't supposed to go to work. We weren't supposed to have a career. We were supposed to get married and have children and raise them in the home. So, yeah, there were not a lot of options available to us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, did you, like, where did that take you then? I want to know.
Right. Yes.
Like,
yeah.
How do you, were there ways you rebelled against that, or what? I guess I want to hear, maybe you're getting there, but I want to hear the part of, like, where did you come out? How did you come out on the other side?
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting because there were 6 of us kids, all with our different personalities and different ways we were impacted by being raised this way. Personally, I was never rebellious. I've always been the observer. So my parents would be talking and, you know, preaching to us, and I would be listening. I was always listening. I never rebelled in that way. I never snuck out of the house. I never did drugs. I didn't drink. I was that perfect good girl. I listened to everything. I did everything I was told.
Oh man, that perfect label.
Yes.
That's like, from my own life, that's a real bad one.
Because I was supposed to represent them. And so I represented them and chose to not shame them as much as I possibly could. So, but where it comes out on the other side isn't pretty, because with all of this conditioning, I didn't know myself.
Yeah.
I had no clue who I was, what I believed in, you know, what my visions and dreams were. So I entered adulthood, still living in my parents' home, and basically just moved into the next situation that was exactly like the one my parents had set up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So living very, from a caretaking place, like, what can I do for you? You know, there is no me, there is no self here. So, yeah.
Did it make it feel like it was hard to make your own choices?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Do you feel like there was ever a point when you made your own choice in that period of your life? Or did it come always from, like, what you were taught?
I would say for the better part of my 20s until I finally got divorced, because of course I married early, raised children, did all that thing. I didn't finally say, wow, I need to do things for me until I was about 28.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like autonomy and personal agency, and the ways that maybe without intending to, our parents take that from us.
Right.
And I think sometimes in the context of like religious conditioning, I think it comes from a place, maybe it comes from an honest place, like this idea of, well, you don't know what's best for you. God knows what's best for you.
Yeah.
But a human being is telling you what that is.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
So, like,
Yes.
it's coming through this middleman
Yes.
who maybe doesn't know what's best
Yes.
for you.
Right.
And
And in my world now, I do believe in source and God, but not the way I was taught of God. To me, I do receive information from a higher source, but it empowers me. It is because I am a divine representation of source, the information I receive is so congruent with who I am as a person. And so my choices are very divinely led, but they're not disempowering. They resonate with me.
Yeah.
You know? I already am, if you want to say perfect, I'm already perfect. I'm already fine.
yeah.
I just have to be in touch with my highest self. So,
Yeah. And I think for me, the idea of religion, the main point of it is always about grace.
yeah.
You know, because we do make mistakes. We do struggle as
Yeah.
humans
Yeah.
because we're not in our highest state yet.
Right.
We're not
Yeah.
we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. Yeah, we're embodied.
And to me, God is unconditional love.
Yeah.
And there what what you're describing from your childhood sounds very conditional.
It is very conditional.
Which is
Yes.
interesting because
Yeah.
they talk about unconditional love while demonstrating
Yes.
very conditional
Right. Yeah.
conditional love.
Yes.
And that confuses me.
Yes.
That confuses me a lot,
Yes,
and
yeah.
I think people don't fully understand the long-term damage that causes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, as a child, I mean, of course, and I hate to use this word, but there was a lot of hypocrisy involved in that community. And it, you know, not just the Christian community. I mean, you see hypocrisy all over the place. But to say God is love, and then where there are spaces where love just exists naturally, you put shame onto it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think there's just a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, and I think that's maybe for that community to have to look in the mirror and
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
I think I'm really sick and tired of seeing people and talking to people who I feel like they need to have years of therapy in order to recover from their religion.
Right. Yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
that's not the purpose of it.
Right.
And I think there are churches and there are groups that are really doing it right and
Oh,
really
there
welcoming
are.
everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
But what makes me sad is that I've seen a lot of mistrust that is bred in people.
Right.
You know, when I come at somebody in a very open-hearted way, it's hard for them to trust me because
Yes.
they've heard people use the term unconditional love.
Right.
They've heard people use the same words I'm using
Right.
in a context that's, and then they see the actions don't match up. So
Right.
I think
Yes.
it's like,
Absolutely.
it's about, can you practice what you're preaching?
Right.
And maybe my filter for that is just that way because of the hypocrisy I saw growing up.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't say that my religious upbringing was it wasn't super conservative or super restrictive per se, but I saw a lot from a young age that what was being said up on the pulpit was not what was being lived
Right.
by that person in their
Right.
life.
Yeah.
And part of that this is a tangent, so
Yeah.
sorry. This is a
Okay.
tangent, but one of the things that really got me as a kid was when I was in high school, I was dating one of the skater boys who lived in the community of my church.
Yeah.
And he was, from the wrong side of the tracks.
Right, yeah.
He was trash,
yeah.
He's not. You're amazing. I love you, Austin. These kids would go to the church to skateboard because there was space for them to do that,
Right.
and they lived in the area. And our pastor would run them off the property.
Yeah.
And I remember being so hurt by that because those kids weren't hoodlums. They
Yeah.
weren't drug dealers.
Right.
They weren't doing drugs.
Yeah.
They were skating
Yeah.
so that they wouldn't be involved in
Right.
those negative things.
Right.
And they created a community with each other because what was going on in their homes was unspeakable.
Yes.
And to me, the church should be the place that's welcoming those children. Like if our pastor had stopped and spoken with them for 5 minutes about
Right.
their life,
Yeah.
he would have known
Yes.
that they were the ones who needed his compassion.
Yeah.
They were the ones trying not to be like their family, trying to do something positive.
Yeah.
And when you stereotype someone just based on what they look like,
Yes.
or those hoodlum skater boys,
Yes.
and I was like, the church is the one judging.
Yeah. Right.
And that's what I saw as growing
Right.
up. I was like,
Yep.
that isn't unconditional. That isn't
Right.
welcoming everyone.
Right.
That isn't, and that's just one example. But I felt like, wow, what a shame. You're missing the point here.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that has made it so it is hard for me to go into a church context and feel comfortable.
Yes.
Because I feel like,
Yeah.
are you saying what you really mean? Like
Yes.
I have a mistrust there
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
because of things I saw growing up. So.
I just have to say, and I mean, this is probably going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, but as a massage therapist for the past 20 years, there are individuals that will ask for extra services, and knowing who these individuals are, and some of them are high up in the community, most of the time, those individuals that have asked me for that are church leaders or other members of the community who are in other positions but are known as being religious. So you tell me, is that integrity? Because to me, living in your God self or your spirituality is living in integrity.
That's a great way to break it down.
Yeah.
And I think what happens, as far as the whole sexual shaming thing, I just think that's so upsetting.
Yeah.
I just think that's so wrong.
Yeah.
Because when we suppress those things, that's why they come out in a negative way.
Exactly.
With
Exactly.
emotions
Yeah.
and with our
Yeah.
sexual feelings, those things are part of being human.
Yes.
So the more we pretend like it's not there,
Yes, exactly.
the more we act out in ways that are destructive and harmful.
Yep.
And I think it's really strange that the church has taken the stand on sex that it has, because I agree with the idea that that's something sacred to share between people.
Absolutely.
I think that was the initial point.
Right. Yes, because it is something sacred. I mean, you're not just sharing your body, you're sharing your emotional and your energetic fields with another person. I mean, it doesn't get more sacred than that.
Yeah. But I think where it goes wrong is how can you share with somebody in a healthy way if you've been taught this is evil, dirty, terrible, horrible? Except for now, all of a sudden, it's not.
Right. Right.
You don't train someone to deny that part of themselves for years.
Yeah.
And then they can suddenly flip the switch and now it's fine.
Right.
That person is going to carry a lot of baggage into that situation.
Yeah.
And they're probably not going to express in a healthy way with their partner.
Yeah.
So you're creating the problem that you're supposedly against.
Right. You're creating a great foundation for sexual addiction, addiction to pornography, things that are really not healthy for us as humans, when our expression should be sacred and safe.
Yeah.
We should be taught to practice our sexuality in a safe space with someone else who holds it sacred.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about a marital contract here. I think it's always like, oh, this marital contract thing is always involved in that. Sacred space can be held between two peoples who are aware. Like, hey, I hold you sacred,
Yeah.
A marital contract has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of people that have marital contracts that don't hold their partner sacred. Sorry, that's not the magic key right there.
Yes, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that can be
That can be a part of
when
it if you choose to.
Right, when two people
Yes.
agree to
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And when two people are on the same page about that,
Right.
that's great.
Yeah.
I just think there's so much there
There's so much there.
that I just can't get on board with spirituality being about denying parts of ourselves that inherently are part of who we
Right.
are.
Yeah, exactly.
And in some ways, I'm very grateful for my church upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I first learned to sing. It's where I first
Yes.
did theater.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was on one hand where I was taught that, if you're standing up on stage and you're singing and you're sharing, that's safe space.
Right.
No one out there should be judging you because
Right.
you're doing this for the glory of
Right.
God.
Right. Sure.
However, the people who taught me that were slowly driven out of my church. The people who were the ones with real spirituality at my church were the ones who were not saying yes to the power dynamic that was happening there.
Right. Yeah.
And this is the stuff that no one wants to talk about. But this is the problem is, I think it's really asking yourself, are you using spirituality in a way that has integrity and authenticity?
Yes.
And what that also means is being willing to admit that you've made a mistake, or
Right.
you weren't following what you
Right.
should have been, or you weren't in alignment.
Right. Yeah.
It's not about our leaders having to be perfect. It's about, can you own your mistake?
Yes. Yeah.
And can you make up for it? And I think there's a lot of contexts where people get in positions of power in churches because of the power aspect of it.
Oh my gosh. You know how appealing that is? To be in a position of power, and especially in a spiritual dynamic where you feel it's the word of God coming through you. Yeah, that's a pretty sacred position, and unfortunately that power and that thrill, it's a thrill, gets abused.
Yeah. And, what's so toxic about it is that everything, it's that you can tell a child anything.
Yeah. That's a scary
And that child
Yes.
will believe
Yes.
it because it's what people they're supposed to be able to
Yes.
trust are saying.
Yeah.
And that people use those manipulative tools to control children and
Yes.
teenagers and young people, and threatening them with threatening them with demon possession if they're not obedient, or oh, you did this thing, let me throw holy water on you, you
Yes.
devil, you
Right. Yeah. That would happen to me.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that in any other context it would be unacceptable.
Oh, totally unacceptable.
But for some reason, this is sanctioned by God, so
Right.
I'm allowed to abuse
Right.
you now, or I'm allowed to say what I have to
Yeah.
say. It's really dangerous.
It is very dangerous. And in summary, compared to the very fear-based control environment that I experience my religion in, my spirituality today is very embodied for one. You know, it's like we just did that breath workshop yesterday. You know, just breathing is a spiritual practice. Just being embodied, you know, being able to allow space for your emotions and your feelings, that's a spiritual practice. You know,
Yes.
to be able to engage in a safe sexual space with another one is a spiritual practice. You know, it's a very empowering and honoring of self individually experience. It's not a blanket generalized one size fits all. You know, I think it really is about honoring each individual, how they've shown up here on the planet. So
There is one question I want to ask you that comes up for me. So, was there a moment for you when you realized you didn't ascribe to that conditioning anymore?
Yeah, I was about 21 or 22, and I just realized I was, and it was also about the same time I decided I wanted to have sex. Like, I was tired of this thing being withheld from me, which I had adhered to, you know, and I decided I did not want the cerebral experience of God anymore, you know, where it was the Bible and writing this stuff out, you know, it very separate from me as an individual. I knew at that time I wanted to experience God in my body. I wanted to experience synchronicities, you know, and feel like, wow, that just felt like divine information connecting to me. I wanted to feel joy just when I was walking outside. I wanted to feel it on a day-to-day basis in my practical daily life. And at that point, I put my Bible down. I said, I'm not going to study for a year. I'm just going to feel what it's like to experience God in my zone. So, yeah.
Wow.
And I went to massage school shortly after that. Yeah. And that's when I was really like, whoa, there is a whole experience happening here in me, you know? It's not separate. It's not in the sky. It's not at a church.
And how funny that structure that was imposed upon you actually got in the way of you actually experiencing God.
It did. And now down the road, you know, I can go into a synagogue or a church and feel very, where divine energy has gathered, you know, and I can appreciate that space now, but not from a shame place, not from the place I was in before where, oh, you better go to church because you're just a freaking sinner, you know.
Yeah.
No, you're a divine being already. You're a divine being already. Yeah.
Yeah, and isn't that made in God's image, right?
Yes,
isn't
right.
that in there?
Like, that's in there. So,
and
why are we being treated otherwise?
Well, and I also think about, I feel like Jesus was the one reaching out to people wherever they were.
Yes.
That's the message I get from that.
Yeah, I mean, my take on Jesus is very different from the Jesus that I was raised with. I mean, this was not somebody sitting in an ego state. This was somebody that was in amongst everybody, doing service work, in service to others, you know, laying on of hands. Like, I feel that way in my work. Like, I'm just sharing myself with others. I'm sharing my energy with others. And you could be the lowliest of the lowly or the highest of the high. It does not matter.
Yeah, because I think ultimately all of us are hurting in some way.
Absolutely.
And so to find ways to reach out to each other is what I would hope religion, I would hope spirituality is about. It's about bridging those gaps, not creating more.
Yes.
And when we create walls within people, because that's, I feel like, what a lot of that super restrictive type religion does. What it does is it makes people close doors on it within themselves, build walls within themselves, tell themselves they're wrong or evil or shameful, that parts of who they are evil, and that's that's the shame to me.
Oh, it is a huge shame, and it's so disconnected and disassociative with our communities and our country. I love that thing that Ellen just shared, the picture of her and George Bush sitting next to each other, and she reposted, she's like, be kind to everybody, not just people you have the same belief system with.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel like, I mean, if you're going to be in your spiritual state, you're being kind to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, oh, you don't believe in what I believe in, so thereby there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And I was raised that, oh, if you didn't believe in, you know, asking Jesus for salvation, there's something wrong with you, you're going to hell. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And I see how people can think that way because they really think that person needs to be saved.
Right.
They are wrong and they
Yes.
will burn in hell if
Yes.
I don't change their
Yes.
mind.
Yes.
So it creates this really
Yeah.
toxic dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's like, is it really that you're worried about that person's soul? Or are you just really terrified of your belief being challenged?
Right.
And maybe discovering
Yes.
that you were the one who was wrong.
Right. Yeah. I think that where my family sort of got it right was that although my parents had this very strict religious system in our household, they were also a bit rebellious themselves. And there was always this curiosity piece that would come in, and this is like my new word that I totally love, is curiosity. They would actually go and challenge the pastors or the associate pastors' sermons sometimes, because they were like, well, wait, we feel a different way about it. And so they would go ahead and bring up different viewpoints, and oftentimes they were just shut down entirely, because of course, but that's where I think we need to go is, hey, okay, so there's this belief that you have or that I have. Let's ask some questions around that. Let's be curious about that, you know, and set our judgments aside for a second.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with tradition or with following. If that's something that resonates for you and makes you feel expansive or feel connected to something, or like being connected to lineage is great.
Right. Like my husband is Jewish. We have mezuzahs on our doorways. Like you can see it, and I love them. You know, there's scrolls in there. There's prayers and blessings, and I love that. You know, it's not. I don't have a problem with tradition.
Yeah.
It's when a tradition is being used to create fear and control over another person.
That's the fear aspect, I think, is the really toxic part. And let's just talk about this for a second, because maybe I already touched on it, but that fear aspect as a way of control, I think it comes down to kind of like teaching your children to not trust their own decisions.
Yes.
I know that that can be a big thing that people with religious kind of abuse or neglect or those types of things have, is like they don't trust themselves to make their own choices.
Yes. You know how disempowering that is? I mean, it's not until, so I've been healing from this religious dynamic for 20 years. It's not until now in my 40s, I actually feel confident that I know myself well enough to make a decision, and that's going to resonate. It's going to be in alignment with what I truly desire.
Yeah. And I had this conversation with a friend. It's like, empowered people empower other people.
Exactly.
So this idea that you beating yourself up and making yourself feel like crap all the time, the idea that could help anybody, to me, is totally absurd.
Oh,
it's this idea that, well, if you don't feel empowered, if you don't like yourself, how are you going to teach somebody else to like themselves?
Right.
How are you going to teach someone else to be empowered to go share their light with the world? Like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and then it really makes you wonder, do you want this person to share their light with the world? And if you don't, what dynamic is going on in here?
What's happening there?
Yes.
Because I've seen people with really bright lights, with really a lot to offer, and those are the ones who are the most trained to kowtow to what other people are telling them to do.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny?
It's pretty awful.
Right.
It's pretty awful.
Yeah. I remember from, this is a very early memory I have. And I'm sure that person doesn't remember it now. But I was probably 8 years old in our church musical.
Yeah.
And that was my, like, singing and dancing and, like, that was me,
Yes,
Yeah. And I was this little girl, singing at the top of my lungs, dancing my butt off, like having a great time in the show. And one of our leaders came up to me and said, I'll never forget this. She said, Amanda, you're standing out a little bit too much. Do you think you can dance a little less? I carried that comment with me for so long. Because again, you think, I should be able to sing and dance for the Lord as loudly and wildly as I want.
There's other churches that encourage you to sing and dance loudly.
Well,
and
I was raised...
Just saying.
I was raised Lutheran, y'all.
Oh,
Lutheran.
God.
Those are they're real quiet. Yeah, but I think, wow. I think back on that and I was like, oh, that's not what you say to an 8-year-old.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, so stuff like that, like ways.
Makes my heart hurt. I mean, I've lived it, been there, healed, recovered, but it just still, those are the ouch moments, man.
Yeah. And obviously I got over it.
Right.
But like this sense of the fact that would even be something. Again, like, shouldn't church be the place where we most feel our light is fueled? Where we most feel that we can shine?
Right.
Also, where we most feel we can be authentically
not
okay?
Yes.
Not healed?
Yeah.
Not happy?
If you just did a blank slate for a second, let's say no one knew what a church was. When someone was describing the experience to you and it's like, oh, it's a holy, sacred space. It's authentic, it's highest alignment, it's divine. I mean, you would be thinking about what you just described. Yeah. But is that our actual experience most of the time? No.
Yeah. And it is funny because there's this whole movement now, in America, this thought of, well, if God was just back in people's lives, if the church was more in the center of people's lives, things would be better.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, let's talk about what is going on in our churches then. Maybe ask yourself why people are leaving the church.
Right.
Maybe ask yourself why that isn't a place where people feel safe to bring all of themselves.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really the problem, is that we don't understand how to have community with each other.
Right.
How to love each other's flaws.
Yeah.
And support and uplift our talents.
Right.
Like that to me is the actual issue, is that this sense of community is missing.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's found in a church or elsewhere, like I think that's the inherent problem.
Yeah.
Is our desire to control what God is, what the divine is.
Yeah.
And inherently that's a force that cannot be controlled.
Right.
It does what it wants.
Right.
And that act of surrender, I think, is what people really have a problem with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there any anyway, is there anything else that you want to
I don't think there's anything else. No, I mean, it's a very complex subject.
Yeah.
So, if anyone wants to share their experience and we can discuss it more.
Yeah, or reach out to us. We're here. Let's end with this. If you were sitting in front of someone who's maybe just realized, like just awakening to the fact that this has happened to them.
Yes.
Just realizing, wow, I was really not treated well by my religious community.
Right.
If they were sitting in front of you, kind of confused, not sure what to do, what would you say to them?
The first thing I would say is give yourself grace during this time of awareness, because you can feel a sense of grief. come up that you have experienced something so damaging to your soul, especially by people, usually family, close friends, the religious community, that really technically are supposed to be the people that uphold you the most. So allow yourself the space to grieve that and hold that awareness. And then I highly recommend sitting with yourself and just taking inventory, and take as much time as you need to do this. This process can take years, and that's okay. But take inventory of yourself and what resonates with you. You know, what is in alignment with you? And spend some time getting to know yourself. And that's the recovery process.
Because you're beautiful, and
you're
you deserve
beautiful.
to be known
Yes.
and seen as you are,
Yes.
not as somebody else wishes
Yes.
you to be.
Yeah.
Because God, spirit, universe,
Yeah.
the source, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it, actually wants us to show up exactly as we are.
Yeah.
And that's totally enough.
And that's enough. Yeah. Yeah. In every way that you've been told you're not enough, I would go, okay, that was something that was projected onto me. I am enough. And all of these things that maybe perhaps have been persecuted, those things are enough, and they're amazing, and they're a unique part of me. So.
And we love you.
Yes.
So thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe. If there's something you want to hear us speak on, or you want to know our opinion on, or you want to know more about, please comment below. We'll take your suggestions. We really welcome everyone into our space.
Yes, absolutely.
And you might not always agree with us, and that's okay too.
That's cool.
But we're just trying to show our perspective and where we're standing in the world, and speaking out about some things that we don't like. Because sometimes we feel sassy and we need to say it. But thanks for being with us again this week, and until next time.